Robert Bridge is an American writer and journalist. He's the author of the book, Midnight in the American Empire, released in 2013. As Sanders gains in the polls, Democratic leaders are getting nervous, arguing that Democratic Socialist has no chance against Trump. The reality, however, is that they are terrified of their radical fringe gaining power. Bernie Sanders has been a cross between an enigma and a bad joke in Washington, D.C. for his entire political career. The disheveled intellectual, who colleagues would invite to cocktail parties just so they could crack jokes behind his back. What's the most optimistic thing Sanders has ever said? It can't possibly get any worse. Today, however, nobody is laughing. The independent senator from Vermont is now the life of the party, the Democratic Party, that is. Less than a week away from the Iowa caucuses, Sanders has pulled far ahead of his fellow presidential wannabes at 39%. Elizabeth Warren inhabits the next closest galaxy at 21%, while Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden are light years away, dodging space junk at 12 and 11% respectively. Is this sudden surge in Sanders' popularity a reflection of dissatisfaction with the lackluster field of candidates, or is his message of social equality beginning to strike a chord with the electorate? Whatever the case may be, the establishment movers and shakers must feel like they are trapped in 1989 Hollywood comedy, Weekend at Bernie's, as they try and figure out what to do with a dead candidate walking, at least as far as defeating Trump in November is concerned. So now the media jackals are piling on, trying to drag Sanders back to earth. Parents must be able to get childcare without struggling to pay rent or buy food. Children must have the best possible head start in life. We are going to finally guarantee universal, quality, affordable childcare in this country. Bernie Sanders, at Bernie Sanders, January 27, 2020. In a strategy disturbingly similar to the one they have deployed against Donald Trump and his base of deplorables, the media has gone on the offensive against Sanders' supporters. When Mr. Sanders' supporters swarm someone online, they often find multiple access points to that person's life, compiling what can amount to investigative dossiers, wrote the New York Times this week in a lengthy article entitled, Bernie Sanders and His Internet Army. They will attack all public social media accounts, posting personal insults that might flow in by the hundreds. Some of the missives are direct threats of violence. Sanders is no more to blame for the behavior of his Twitter followers, however, than he is for winning the support of super-popular podcast host Joe Rogan, who has expressed harsh opinions about the transgender movement in the past. This piece triggered woke Joe Biden to virtue signal on behalf of transgender people, even though he spoke out in the past against gay marriage. Also on RT.com, issue of our time, Biden tries to win over transgender community with a tweet while Sanders deals with Rogan endorsement fallout in any event. Attacking a candidate's supporters is low-hanging fruit for indolent journalists who are sending the message that Sanders, who boasts some 9 million followers on Twitter alone, should somehow be able to control the individual send buttons of his many supporters. That is, of course, ridiculous. The fierce criticism being hurled at Sanders and his team, however, goes much deeper than just some mindless fools talking trash on social media. The media smears are symptomatic of what is essentially an ideological struggle inside of the Democratic Party. It's one thing for Joe Rogan to endorse a candidate. It's another for Bernie Sanders' campaign to produce a video bolstering the endorsement of someone known for promoting transphobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, racism and misogyny. Move on, January 25. 2020 Democrats feel the socialist burn in 2016. Following his failure to win the Democratic nomination, pundits were quick to consign Sanders to the graveyard of political has-beens. Now they are grappling with the realization that not only may the die-hard progressive be the last hope for denying Trump another term, but he is also serving as a lightning rod for rallying the radical progressive fringe inside of the Democratic Party. For the veteran Democrats, the Pelosi's, Schumer's, Nadler's and Schiff's, this presents a direct threat both to their grip on power and the future of the Democratic Party. The face of the Democrats' progressive left is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who in 2018 became one of the first female members of the Democratic Socialists of America, the largest socialist organization in the U.S., which has witnessed since 2016 a surge in membership following the election of Donald Trump. Despite being a congressional freshman, Ocasio-Cortez, together with three other relatively young women of color, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley and Rashida Tlaib, collectively known as the Squad, has publicly clashed with veteran party leaders over a number of issues. At the same time, they are advocating aggressively on new policy plans encompassed by the so-called Green New Deal, which aims to tackle climate change and economic inequality. In the event that Bernie Sanders emerges victorious against Trump in November, it would be hard to overestimate the massive Category 5 changes that would occur inside of the Democratic Party. Because the Squad has hitched its star to Sanders' rickety wagon, there exists an energized coalition to forward the Democratic Socialists' aggressive agenda that includes, among other things, canceling student tuition debt and providing free healthcare for all, while reducing America's military footprint around the world. In America, that is about as close to communism as you can get. 1. No, I am not afraid that a Sanders presidency will threaten my class privileges because there won't be ONEB. Sanders' nomination dooms the hopes of flipping the Senate. Sanders' presidency, the House will also be lost by Dems in 2022. David Frum, at David Frum, January 27, 2020. Considering how American politicians on both sides are massively indebted to their lobbyist paymasters, few have the freedom to sign up to such radical proposals even if they wanted to. Thus, without admitting to their subservience, the Democratic elites say their fear of a Sanders presidency has nothing to do with his mega-progressive agenda. Rather, they say, Bernie would stand no chance of defeating Trump. Bernie Sanders is a fragile candidate, wrote David Frum in The Atlantic, in an article tersely entitled, Bernie Can't Win. He has never fought a race in which he had to face serious personal scrutiny. None of his Democratic rivals are subjecting him to such scrutiny in 2020. Also on RT.com, the media hates Joe Rogan because they don't understand him or Frum and other Democratic apologists, correct? Will Trump, the ultimate capitalist, eat Sanders for lunch in November before asking for seconds? Iris Frum downplaying the reality, which is that America is totally prepared for a socialist future. Can Sanders dethrone Trump? Although Bernie Sanders talks a big game about social equality, redistributing the wealth and all that, he is in fact the epitome of the so-called limousine liberal. In 2016, perhaps as a consolation prize for his campaign loss, he forked out over $575,000 on a lakefront home in Vermont. He also owns a row house in Washington, D.C., and another in his home state. His personal wealth is estimated in the millions. Thus far, his extravagant lifestyle has not hurt his socialist message, but Trump will certainly not waste the opportunity to mock it. How many yachts do billionaires need? How many cars do they need? Give us a break. You can't have it all. Bernie Sanders, at Bernie Sanders, April 21, 2017. Another reason Sanders would struggle against Trump is that the U.S. economy is roaring, at least on paper. While many of the biggest gains are being consumed, as usual, by the wolves on Wall Street, it is undeniable that the U.S. economy has been on a roll ever since Trump entered office. How much of that is attributable to the Obama years is a matter of debate, but unemployment under Trump is down, and wages are up, while the stock market continues smashing new records. In other words, what can a democratic socialist really offer the American people at this point? Sanders' socialist message would have been tailor-made for addressing the post-2008 financial crisis. For example, but at a time when the economy is speeding along on cruise control, Americans will have trouble trading in their entrenched capitalist values for socialist ones. It should not be forgotten that there are few words more grating to American ears than socialism. Although public opinion is gradually changing in favor of greater government involvement to address the country's long list of social ills, Trump will take great pleasure in connecting Sanders to the radical progressives of the Squad, otherwise known as The Four Horsewomen of the Apocalypse, also on RT.com paging pop. This is Kettle, nobody likes him. Hillary Clinton says of divisive Bernie Sanders at present, the Republicans can afford a hearty chuckle at the expense of the Democratic Party's radical progressive fringe, and even shrug as the prospect of an election fight against Bernie Sanders. But how long the laughs will continue is another question. Trump and the Democrats seem to share a common enemy, and that is the fledgling outgrowth of socialism in the most cutthroat capitalist country on earth. How will the Democrats address the problem for the Democratic Socialists shaking up their ranks? Personally, I wouldn't be surprised by the last-minute inclusion of Hillary Clinton in the Democratic contest. At this point in the game, the Democrats have absolutely nothing to lose, aside from the likely prospect of Bernie refusing to declare his support for the Democratic matriarch for a second time. At Robert Bridge like this story? Share it with a friend. The statements, views and opinions expressed in this column are solely those of the author and do not necessarily represent those of RT. Let's block ads. Why?